My doctor looked at the results and said he wanted to run them again. Not because something was wrong, because something was too right. My testosterone was at the high end of the normal range for a man my age. My inflammatory markers were low, lower than men 15 years younger. He kept turning the page over like the numbers might be printed on both sides. I'm 58 years old. I hadn't touched a prescription in 2 years. I hadn't changed gyms. I had changed what I put on my plate. That was it. And I tell you this not to impress you, but because I remember what it felt like to be sitting in that same chair 3 years earlier and being told that what I was going through was expected at my age. I believed him. I shouldn't have. If you've been told the same thing, stay with me. What I found, and I found it slowly, eating my way toward it without knowing what I was building, is here in this video. The part that changed everything I'm saving for later. But it's here. I'm going to tell you what the worst period looked like. It started quietly. That's the thing nobody warns you about. It doesn't come as a crisis. It comes as a series of small compromises. I started going to bed a little earlier than I used to, and my wife didn't ask why. I stopped initiating, and she stopped waiting for me to. We were kind to each other about it, which in some ways made it lonelier. Kindness can be a way of agreeing not to name something. There was a morning, I remember it was early, the kitchen was still dark, I had gotten up before her. When I stood at the counter waiting for the coffee and I thought, for the first time with real clarity, I'm not going to get this back. I didn't cry, I didn't panic. I just stood there and let myself believe it, the way you eventually accept a room you've lived in long enough. I went to the doctor a few weeks later because something shifted lower in my body. Not urgency, but a kind of dull weight I hadn't noticed before. He examined me, asked questions, ordered blood. When the results came back, he told me my testosterone was in the lower range of normal. That phrase, lower range of normal. I asked him what that meant practically. He said it was expected for my age, that my prostate was fine, that I could look into certain medications if the quality of life issues persisted. He said it without looking up from his notes. I drove home, and I sat in the car in front of the house for a while without going in. I wasn't angry yet. I was just tired. Tired of being handed a category to live inside of. The lower range of normal for a man my age. As if that were the whole story. I didn't fill the prescription. I put the paper in the glove compartment and forgot it was there. The thing that broke it open came from a man I had known for more than 20 years. We had worked together for a long time. He was older than me by about 8 years, mid-60s, the kind of man who doesn't talk much, but when he does, you remember what he said. We had lunch every few months. At one of those lunches, I don't know what made me say it. Maybe I was just tired of carrying it. I told him what was going on. Not everything. Enough. He didn't react the way I expected. He didn't offer a solution immediately. He sat with it for a moment and then said, I went through the same thing 3 years ago. I eat differently now. That was it. That was the whole sentence. I waited for more. He said he'd started paying attention to what the body actually uses to build certain things. That the gut has more to do with it than most men realize. He mentioned a few things he'd started eating every day. And then, almost as an aside, he mentioned something he'd started taking alongside the food, a combination he'd come across that had been formulated around some specific plants. He wasn't selling me anything. He wasn't even recommending it exactly. He just said, it's in the description if you want to look. I put it in a note on my phone when I found it. And then we talked about something else. Now, I should tell you what kind of man I was about supplements. I want you to understand this clearly because it matters. I thought that world, the capsule world, the label world, was designed for desperate men who hadn't yet accepted what was happening to them. I had too much self-respect to be that man. Or I thought I did. It turned out what I actually had was a very convincing story about why I didn't need to look. What broke that story wasn't an argument. It was watching my old friend, a man I'd known for decades, a man who didn't dramatize anything, order the same meal he always had, and look like a man who'd quietly, without announcement, turned something around. I went home and I looked up the combination he'd mentioned. I read through it. I wasn't convinced, but I was curious enough to try it for a month. What I noticed after about 10 or 12 days wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of thing you almost dismiss because you want to be sure before you trust it. But the mornings started to feel different. There was a quality of readiness I hadn't felt in years. Not performance, not expectation, just the body signaling that it was present again. I kept going. By the end of the month, I was certain enough to keep it in the routine. The two things in that formula that I noticed most, in plain language because I'm not a researcher, were what they call the Peruvian root, which people call maca, and something called milk thistle. The maca was in everything my friend had mentioned, and I could feel why, not in a dramatic way, but in the way that desire becomes less effortful, less pushed. The milk thistle I almost skipped over, but I came to understand it as the thing that gets the body back to balancing itself. The liver does something with excess hormones, and when the liver is well, the body recalibrates. I can't explain it better than that. But I noticed it. The link to what I found is in the description. It's there if you want to take a look. I'm not asking you to decide anything now, but let me tell you what actually made the difference with the food, because this was the other half of it. The first thing I changed was not a food. It was a habit around a food. I had been eating my largest meal at the end of the day for most of my adult life. Dinner, generous portions, often late. It felt like a reward. My old friend mentioned offhand that he'd moved the weight of his eating to midday, and I didn't think much of it until I tried it. The change I noticed wasn't in weight or digestion. It was in sleep. Deep sleep. The kind where you wake up and you've actually been somewhere. A study from a university sleep research center found that eating heavily within 3 hours of sleep suppresses the deepest sleep phases, the ones where the body does its most significant hormonal work. Testosterone is rebuilt at night. If the gut is laboring through a large meal, the body's resources go there instead. The mistake most men make is eating the same as they always have and wondering why their mornings feel flat. The instruction is simple. Move your biggest meal to midday. Keep dinner light. Give the body 5 hours between eating and sleep. The second food was something I'd been eating wrong my entire life. Olive oil. I had used it for cooking, high heat, the way everyone does. What I didn't know was that the compound that makes it useful for hormonal health is destroyed at cooking temperatures. It needs to be eaten cold, on bread, over vegetables, directly from a spoon, if that's what it takes. I started doing this with every meal that allowed it. The connection, as far as I understand it, is that testosterone is built from fat, the right kind of fat. And if the body doesn't have the raw materials, it can't build what it needs. A paper from a nutritional medicine research group observed that men who consumed adequate quantities of monounsaturated fat from olive oil had measurably higher baseline testosterone than men on low-fat diets. The most common mistake is cooking with it. Don't cook with it. Use it raw, and use more of it than you think is right. If you're finding what I'm sharing useful, I'll ask one thing. Give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't. I'm not doing this for numbers. I'm doing this because there are men who need to hear it, and the algorithm only shows it to more of them when the signal is there. If you know one of those men, share this with him. The third food was dark leafy greens, not for the reason you might think, not for vitamins, for what they do inside the gut. There is a kind of estrogen the male body produces and needs to clear. When the gut is inflamed or slow, that clearance is impaired, and excess estrogen sits in the system longer than it should, working against testosterone. Leafy greens, the dark ones, the ones with some bitterness to them, feed the bacteria in the gut that are responsible for managing this clearance. A research team at a gastroenterology institute measured the difference in estrogen metabolism between men with diverse gut flora and men with depleted flora, and the numbers were not small. The mistake men make is eating them cooked until they're soft and almost flavorless. The beneficial compounds survive better when the leaves are minimally cooked. Quick heat, still some texture. Eat them daily, not occasionally. The fourth was something I almost dismissed because it seems too simple. Walnuts. A small handful, eaten in the morning before anything else, before coffee. The mechanism, as far as I understand it, involves the way the body reads its first input of the day. The gut wakes up and begins signaling based on what it receives first. Walnuts contain a combination of plant compounds and fats that seem to prime the gut for anti-inflammatory behavior throughout the day. A clinical nutrition study found that men who consumed a daily portion of walnuts showed lower inflammatory markers and improved arterial function over 8 weeks. The most common mistake is eating them salted, roasted, or after other food. Eat them plain, raw, and first thing. These 4 things together, the meal timing, the cold olive oil, the dark greens, the walnuts, built something over months that I didn't expect. And alongside what I found in that combination my friend pointed me to, they built a version of myself I had written off. I'm 58. I don't have the body of a younger man, but I have a body that functions. And there is a difference, I've lived on both sides of it, between a body that apologizes and a body that participates. Tell me in the comments, is there something you eat or drink every day that you suspect is working against you, and you haven't changed it yet? I ask because most men know the answer. They just haven't said it out loud. There is something I want to say plainly before you close this video. The body responds to input. It is always responding to input. But the quality of that response is not constant. It shifts with age, and what the body can do with the right inputs at 58 is different from what it will be able to do at 65. Not impossible then, not closed, but different. The window is real. I nearly missed mine by standing still long enough to believe that standing still was the only option. The quiet cost of not deciding is not nothing. It's more mornings of going through the motions. More nights of sleeping in the same bed and being further away than the distance between the mattresses. I know what that feels like. I lived in it for 2 years thinking it was just the way things were. It wasn't. What I covered in this video and what's in the description belong together. Neither one is the whole answer. They work because they address the same problem from 2 directions, what the body receives and what it needs to do the work. The link is in the description and pinned in the comments. Go there, read through it, and make your own call. I'm not going to tell you it's urgent or that the window closes tomorrow. But I will tell you this. The men I've known who turned things around didn't wait until they were ready. They decided, and readiness followed.